Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to help you navigate, the constant flood of information out there. And today, we're tackling some really big news that just dropped. It's about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the CPB. We've gathered reports from, all over, really. All fresh today, August 1st, 2025. Places like ABC7, Newsbreak, Common Dreams, WLTX, ABC News, GMA, Al Jazeera. Quite a list. So, our goal here is to unpack what happened, why it happened, and what might come next with this CPB announcement. We want to pull out the key things you need to know fast, because this isn't just some, bureaucratic shuffle. It touches on media, funding, communities.
Oh, absolutely. It's bigger than it might seem at first glance. CPB's reach, its impact over, nearly 60 years. It's quite surprising. We're talking education, local news, even emergency info.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The big news today, Friday, August 1st. CPB made a major announcement. What exactly did they say?
They announced they're starting an orderly wind down of operations. That's the official term they use.
A wind down. And what does that mean, right now?
Well, the immediate impact is pretty stark. Most staff positions gone by September 30th. That's very soon.
Wow. Less than 2 months.
Yeah. And then a small transition team stays on until January 2026, basically just to handle the closeout responsibly, make sure everything's wrapped up properly.
That is incredibly fast for an organization that's been around so long. What did the leadership, Patricia Harrison, the CEO, what did she say about this?
She put out a statement calling it a difficult reality. She acknowledged the, quote, extraordinary efforts of millions of Americans who tried to save the funding calls, letters, petitions to Congress.
But it wasn't enough, clearly.
No. She said CPB is still committed to its fiduciary responsibilities and supporting their partners, the stations, through it all with transparency and care. But yeah, the reality is closure.
Okay, so the big question then is, why? Why this sudden shutdown after all these years and, as she said, public support?
Oh.
What was the actual trigger?
It really boils down to one thing. Federal funding cuts. Congress voted back in July to cut $1.1 billion meant for CPB.
$1.1 billion. That sounds like a lot for them.
It effectively zeroed out their funding for 2 whole years. Just gone.
And how did that happen legislatively? What were the steps?
There were 2 key moves really close together. First, Congress passed something called the Rescission Act of 2025.
A rescission.
Yep.
So taking back money already promised.
Exactly. It clawed back funding already approved for CPB and some other programs. That passed the Senate, 51-48, really tight. And the House was even closer, 216-13.
Razor-thin margins.
Very. And then, the very next day, July 31st, the Senate Appropriations Committee released its funding bill for 2026, and CPB just wasn't in it, completely excluded.
First time in how long?
Over 50 years, 5 decades they've been in those appropriations bills. So yeah, major shift.
So those were the mechanisms. But this feels politically driven, doesn't it? It wasn't just about finding savings anywhere. This seems targeted.
Oh, definitely. It ties directly into President Trump's push to cut $9 billion overall from the budget. But his focus on CPB was, let's say, particularly sharp.
He's mentioned defunding them before, right?
Many times over the years. But this time he was very explicit. He put out a statement on social media back on July 10th.
What did it say? I remember it caused a stir.
Yeah, it did. He said, and this is a direct quote, "It is very important that all Republicans adhere to my rescissions bill, and in particular, defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS and NPR, which is worse than CNN and MSDNC put together."
Wow. Directly calling them out and comparing them to cable news.
And then he added the crucial part. Any Republican that votes to allow this monstrosity to continue broadcasting will not have my support or endorsement.
So tying it directly to his political support, that explains those narrow votes, maybe. A lot of pressure.
Immense pressure. It wasn't just a suggestion. It was framed as a loyalty test.
Was there any real pushback within Congress, or did everyone just fall in line?
Well, there were attempts. Senator Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, she actually drafted an amendment to try and restore the funding. She ended up withdrawing it, though she apparently still expressed some hope they could fix it later. But on the other side, you have Senator Shelley Moore Capito, Republican from West Virginia, basically saying the issue was settled. She said it had already been, quote, litigated.
Meaning the decision was made, move on.
Pretty much seemed to be the sentiment from that side, yeah. The votes reflected that.
Okay, so that's the what and the why. Let's talk about the so what. What does this actually mean for, the media world and for people listening? We need to understand what CPB actually did.
Absolutely. It's easy to forget its role. CPB's history goes back quite a way. President Lyndon Johnson signed it into law 58 years ago. 1967.
LBJ. And what was the idea behind it?
Congress gave it a specific mission: build and sustain a trusted public media system. The key words there are trusted and public, non-commercial educational focus.
And how did it do that, practically speaking?
Its main function was providing grants, money, to over 1,500 local public radio and TV stations all across the country.
Not just the big NPR and PBS networks we hear about.
No. A lot of these are small, independent stations, many in rural places. Plus, yes, it also funded producers for some of those big, well-known PBS and NPR shows.
Which ones are we talking about? People probably know them.
Oh, definitely. Iconic stuff. Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Novi, Frontline, NPR's All Things Considered, shows that have been staples for decades.
Huge cultural impact. Educational, too.
Immense.
And you mentioned the political side. This wasn't the first time public broadcasting has been in the crosshairs, was it?
Not by a long shot. This fight goes way back. Republicans have been targeting public media funding for years, really since the Nixon administration in the 70s.
In Nixon?
Wow.
Why? What was the argument then?
Often it's centered on claims of liberal bias. That's been a recurring theme. President Trump's push is framed by supporters as, part of that ongoing effort, but also as cutting government bloat and targeting institutions he sees as un-American.
And he took other actions recently, too, didn't he, before the funding cut?
He did. Back in April, he fired several CPB board members. So this funding cut feels like the culmination of a long-term strategy, really. It's not just about dollars and cents. It's deeply ideological. It's about who controls the narrative.
A decades-long battle really coming to a head here.
Exactly. Market-driven media versus media serving a public civic function, especially in places where the market maybe doesn't reach.
Okay, that brings us to the ripple effects. Who gets hit hardest by this shutdown? You said the big names, NPR, PBS, they'll likely be okay because they have other funding sources.
Right. They get a lot from foundations, corporations, individual donors. They'll feel it, but they'll survive. The real pain, the disproportionate impact, is going to be at the local level.
The smaller stations?
Exactly. Small local news stations, especially the ones serving rural communities, they are going to be, quote, seriously affected. For many of them, CPB money wasn't just part of the budget. It was the budget, or a huge chunk of it.
Do we know how reliant some of these stations were? Are there examples?
Yeah, the reports mention a few. KCW in Pendleton, Oregon, KUHB in St. Paul, Alaska, WVLS in Monterey, Virginia. Stations like these apparently relied on CPB for up to 90% of their funding.
90%. How do you even survive that?
That's the terrifying question for them right now. It really underscores that this isn't hitting everyone equally. National organizations will adapt, maybe cut back. But for some local communities, this could mean their public station just vanishes.
And are there other impacts, maybe less obvious than stations closing?
Yeah, there are practical things too. Like many NPR stations use that federal money to pay music licensing fees. That's a fundamental cost of broadcasting music.
So now they have to find that money elsewhere.
Or maybe play less music. Catherine Maher, NPR CEO, pointed out something striking. She estimated 96% of all classical music broadcast in the U.S. is on public radio.
96%. That's almost all of it.
It's huge. So yeah, losing that funding could have a real cultural impact beyond just news.
And what are the heads of these station groups saying?
They're sounding the alarm loud and clear. Kate Riley, who heads America's public television stations, she apparently lambasted Republicans over the cuts.
Strong word.
Yeah. She said local stations are already, right now, cutting services and staff. And some are actively planning to close down entirely. She called the effects real and imminent, not theoretical, happening now.
It sounds incredibly disruptive. It really comes back to what Patricia Harrison said, doesn't it? About public media being this trusted institution, providing education, emergency alerts, culture.
Civil discourse, connection, especially in places that might not have many other options. It really highlights that these aren't just media outlets. They're often community hubs, essential services.
Okay, so let's quickly recap this deep dive. We've seen the Corporation for Public Broadcasting announcing its shutdown, effective very soon.
Driven directly by Congress cutting its federal funding completely, which itself was heavily pushed by the White House.
Right. We touched on the long political history behind targeting public media, often citing bias, but this time framed very starkly by President Trump.
And the impact, while national organizations like NPR and PBS will likely weather it, is falling hardest on small, local, often rural stations, some of which face imminent closure, threatening news access, cultural programming, and more.
So we've covered the what, the why, the impact. It leaves us with a pretty significant question, I think.
Definitely. Given that CPB had this mission for nearly 60 years, informing, educating, serving communities, being that trusted source, what does its closure really mean for the future?
Especially thinking about local information, diverse programming, those essential services, in a media world that feels more and more fragmented every day.
Right. What happens, particularly in those communities that might already be struggling for reliable local news, the so-called news deserts? What fills that gap, if anything? That's something to really think about.